Over the past couple years, TF2 has had its fair share of incidents, like the bot crisis or me or match. But what if I told you, there's an even bigger nightmare from the game right now that is comparable to the severity of the bot crisis, and we as the player base have done nothing but actively support it since the early ages of TF2. What I'm talking about is the TF2 workshop, and more specifically, a group which calls themselves the TF2 Emporium. They, for the most part, have had a chokehold on the TF2 market for years, flooding the Steam workshop with hats and cosmetics that are in thousands of backpacks. You might be confused or even offended that I could put a group of people that simply make hats for the game on the same regard as people who have actively tried to destroy the game over the past couple years. But the Emporium actually has been destroying the game in a way that's different from what you'd normally expect from bad actors. They have actively held a monopoly over the workshop for years, and it isn't necessarily as hard of a monopoly as something like Scrap.tf or Backpack.tf is to the economic trading side of TF2. But the monopoly the Emporium has is more like the type where you are incredibly disadvantaged as an independent workshopper compared to more other well-known creators that Valve typically picks for cosmetic drops if you aren't a part of their cabal. Without being in the Emporium group, you don't have nearly enough of the resources or connections that most of the other members have in order for the workshop to be a fair competition for all the submitters. It also doesn't help that the Emporium runs on an arbitrary hierarchy system where newer members to the Emporium must suck up to the more experienced creators with multiple items in the game in order to get into the good graces of the community. By sucking up, I mean creating concepts or even entire cosmetics just for the experienced workshopper to come in and have the name associated with the work, just so the item has a better chance of getting put into the game. But you might be wondering how it all came to be this way. Before we get into it, let's first start from the beginning and explain how we ended up here. The year is 2009, and following the recent Sniper vs Spy update, which added the first cosmetics to TF2, many players have started their own journey of creating custom cosmetics for the game and modding them in on sites like Facepunch. This is where the first version of the TF2 Emporium would be created. The whole reason the Emporium was created was to be a way for passionate modders for the game to share their creations and have discussion. But as time went on and the numbers grew, so did Valve's attention to the group. And later on January 13th, 2010, Valve announced a new community item submission program, which became the Steam Workshop years later. The program allowed for creators to submit their items into the game and receive a % of the earnings per in-game purchase. Everything was going well for both the community and Valve, as creators would submit items for the game, which would be packaged into community contribution updates. With some workshoppers going as far as creating full fake updates for TF2, complete with update pages and cosmetics, some of which getting added into real updates for the game. Some of the most notable fake updates for the game being the Fancy vs Nasty update created by Master Rozo and the Medieval update, which were both acknowledged by Valve in blog posts and had content used in official updates. At this point in 2012, Valve was really starting to recognize these fan-made updates, and only a couple months after MVM's release, the Robotic Boogaloo update got added into the game, and officially marked the point where Valve would rely entirely on its community to make updates for the game, with everything down to the promotional material, the update page, and of course the cosmetics, all of which being made entirely by the community. This is officially when we reach the point of no return in terms of community content for the game, since Valve knew that they didn't need to work as hard anymore on providing content for the game, as the community would do it themselves. The game would continue following its trajectory of adding predominantly community-created updates for years, and community-created updates would continue, but after the Emporium moved away from Facepunch, the TF2 Emporium would take a turn for the worst, starting with the Invasion update in 2015. What happened with the Invasion update? It was basically a drama involving payment for each contributor to the project, as the two project leaders, Bang and Ronan, took up a combined percentage of 54%. Despite not doing the majority of the work, things got so out of hand with the countless leaks and delays that Valve themselves had to step in to fully clarify how payment would go. The two project leaders would claim that it wasn't their fault for the update being delayed and that they weren't taking a majority cut of the money, but I wouldn't be so sure to take this information from the same people who friend to Sue Tyler McVicker or Valve News Network at the time because of his video discussing the Invasion drama and shining them in a bad light.
And what happened was I made a video on it, and then Bang and Ronan, the two people in charge of the Invasion update, threatened to sue me.
It's safe to say that after this terrible fumble on the community side for this update, with it becoming too much work than it's worth on Valve's side, Valve stopped doing any potential future updates from the community and resorted to only pulling workshop submissions from other community updates, or should I say content packs, into updates that they would make, and this has been the status quo for years following Jungle Inferno. With the Civil War, that was the invasion update, you could say that was only a teaser for what would come later down the line, and the TF2 Emporium, which was associated with the invasion update, would make a surprise appearance in more community drama beginning in 2017, with the Jungle Inferno update. First, before I begin talking about this part and mentioning names, please do not go out of your way to harass any of the people involved in this drama, as it just makes you as bad as the workshoppers who harassed other individuals. This incident involves two members of the Emporium, being Drew and Metabolic, both still active in the TF2 community, and frequently get their items added into the game through seasonal updates. And this drama is about both of these members attacking another workshopper named Vibes, to the degree of making him homeless for a couple of months while having his social security number and identity stolen. The harassment and rumors starting from a single cosmetic concept that Vibes posted that ended up getting stolen, with the people who stole the concept claiming that Vibes was actually the one who stole their idea, and that he stole many other ideas as well, with a whole pastebin page made showing off each time Vibes stole ideas for his items. If you take a moment to look at the evidence, you can tell it's a huge stretch to even call them remotely similar, and this whole idea of Vibes stealing or putting the bare minimum effort into his work was perpetuated by Drew, with his claims being backed up by alt accounts from anonymous users. This wasn't just a case of one or two people picking on an individual. It was an entire dedicated team of people dead set on harassing and tarnishing Vibes' reputation. The harassment didn't stop, and when the popular heavy JoJo hat, the Starboard Crusader, had its badges removed on release, Drew started spreading the rumor that Vibes was the reason the hat lost its badges through Reddit on an alt account, tricking numerous people into believing the rumor, causing countless death threats, harassment, and doxing, all because of a TF2 hat. Hopefully by now, you understand how deranged the situation was, and that the Emporium has some of the biggest lunatics in the TF2 community, with the worst part being, no one wants to speak up on the matter, or they would be bullied out of the community, just like Vibes. And if Drew or Metabolic did manage to get called out, the Emporium members would brush off the claims, or even defend him. The biggest concern I have with the Emporium, apart from all the terrible things they've done, is the fact that most members simply sweep every type of incident under the rug and move on. The fact that it seems like most Emporium members don't even care, or are oblivious to the things that their own members have done, is just baffling, and it just shows you what the Emporium really cares about. As long as the person who did all the terrible things is a big cash cow to the Emporium, they will continue having them involved in nearly every item submission, and anyone who criticizes them is the bad guy. This sort of deflective behavior is a common defensive mechanism by most Emporium members, and has been performed numerous times on anyone who goes against them.
I went to you guys first. I went to the workshop. I went inside the Emporium, and you banned me.
Yeah, after you, fucking ran a ruckus in there. Holy shit.
Someone who I'd also like to mention is BlueNES. BlueNES was a workshop creator that had been in the Emporium Discord and was involved in the workshop community since 2015. But the reason he left and how he was treated by the Emporium differs from Vibes, but still shares some commonality. Following the aftermath of the invasion update, some major contributors ended up becoming more self-centered, and general toxicity in the Emporium grew, with most big workshoppers and admins feeling the need to be toxic to smaller workshop creators because they were higher status, mostly acting like they were higher class to normal TF2 players just because they make items for the game. This culture is still seen in the Emporium till this day, with most members becoming better at hiding it the longer they've been in the workshopping scene. The Emporium at this time was starting to become more elitist and toxic since Jungle Inferno, and during this time, BlueNES was accused of not churning out enough items for Jungle Inferno, despite having a backlog of items at the time due to personal related issues. He was even accused of being a racist, which wasn't true, and he was pretty much the only person at the time standing up to the Emporium for what they did. Eventually in late 2019, BlueNES did have a talk with one of the admins, and he did manage to come to a peaceful resolution with them, but it still didn't change the fact that he was still banned from the Emporium Discord server, only being unbanned recently because of an admin switch up in the Emporium Discord server. There's also the fact that after BlueNES left the Emporium, many people started saying he wanted to create another Emporium, but for the working class, and that by far should tell you how egotistical the Emporium can be, with many of them regarding themselves on a higher level than normal TF2 players simply because they make hats. Despite everything that happened, the Emporium really hasn't changed for the better, as they've only gotten better at covering up their tracks in the form of wiping channels and covering up incriminating messages from their big name members. The thing with the Emporium is that some of their members do it full time and see their community as a competitive market where only the strongest and most notable can win and get the most money from hats. This explains the reason why the Emporium is as competitive as it is, with big name members inserting themselves into nearly every cosmetic for new seasonal updates, and why they feel the need to remove any potential competitors from the market. At the end of the day, it's all about profit, and the Emporium in its current state is a far cry from how the Emporium originally operated back in the Face Punch days, with it rather being a free-for-all collaborative market instead of a gatekeepy competitive hierarchy system where members below the ones at the top need to suck up to them in order to start moving up the chain. Despite everything that happened, the Emporium really hasn't changed for the better, as they've only gone better at covering up their tracks in the form of wiping channels and sweeping drama involving their big name members under the rug. I'd also like to mention how nearly every Emporium submission nowadays just panders to the lowest common denominator to get votes from people who don't care about TF2. A good example of this would be the overwhelming amount of animal cosmetics made simply just to get sympathy votes from people who take 1 second to look at the item before upvoting it because it looks cute. All VScript game modes and maps with gimmicks, because every map now needs to have a landmark feature, right? Most big names from the Emporium don't try to design something that aesthetically meshes well with the game and makes for a good cosmetic that people would actually want to buy, but instead, they just design a cosmetic that ticks off all the boxes. For example, pop culture references or hats that follow trends. The harsh truth about the Emporium is no matter what sort of messed up actions people take or the crimes they commit, as long as they're on the top of the hierarchy system, they'll still be allowed back in with no repercussions. Drew and Metablog were never truly banned from the server, and no one really cared about what they did. One of them is still on the server, despite the Emporium claiming that they aren't, and the other one still has connections with many Emporium workshop creators, only being gone from the server because he left on his own accord. Recently, I've even seen some Emporium members try to twist the narrative that the reason why Drew isn't active online is because Zesty Jesus doxed him, which never happened, and just puts into perspective who these people really are and the amount of lies they put out just to defend their own top members. Emporium members also don't actually care about TF2's art style, and frequently mock it by making ugly low-effort cosmetics for the game like this. Or when they do put effort in cosmetics, it's usually overhyped garbage. Most of the big names in the Emporium have stated time and time again that they don't care about TF2 or its player base, and frequently express their disdain towards the community, telling TF2 players to go play a different game or just outright calling them annoying. Do you really think a group of people who don't care about TF2 should actively profit from it and get their submissions added into the game? One common justification many Emporium members have for making terrible cosmetics is that Valve selects the items, so it's Valve's responsibility for choosing good items for the game. On paper, this argument makes sense, as Valve should be the final judge when it comes to deciding what gets added into the game, but we all know at this point, Valve doesn't care about TF2, and any upheld guidelines for workshop submissions have been thrown out the window. Ever since 2021, we've been getting increasingly worse cosmetic submissions throughout the years, almost as if workshop creators are pushing the envelope to see how much they can get away with. There needs to be a shared responsibility when it comes to cosmetics for TF2, both for Valve and workshop creators, especially when TF2 relies on this community for updates, and it absolutely should be the workshop creators' responsibility to make items which are on the expected high standard that they should be. Workshoppers should always expect that the item could get accepted into the game, and shouldn't use the excuse of Valve selects the items for making bad cosmetics. You also can't label anything Valve adds as good because they know what's best for the game, because they clearly don't and haven't for years. Zesty Jesus is someone who I'm sure most of you all know, as he's garnered a reputation for being one of the Emporium's biggest critics, or the TF2's workshop's biggest critic for that matter, but it wouldn't be an Emporium video without having a section about Zesty Jesus. So let's get started. Following the 2021 Smithsworth update that gave us some of the worst cosmetics in the game in a single update, reaching absolute rock bottom in terms of quality, Zesty would begin his journey of openly criticizing the quality of content being added into the game by publishing a video on January 22nd, 2022, discussing the horrible state of the TF2 workshop, and subsequently called out the TF2 Emporium for continuing to make bad cosmetics. He would continue talking about the workshop only a month later, in February, through his workshop review series, where he would livestream on his second channel, critiquing workshop submissions given to him by his audience, in the hopes that the quality of items being suggested for the game would improve through the creators listening to the feedback and improving upon the items. It's apparent through Zesty's efforts that seasonal updates have changed for the better, with updates like Summer 2023 or Smithsfest 2023 having much better looking cosmetics as opposed to Smithsfest 2021. But as you could guess, the Emporium would not like these workshop review streams, especially members who did make terrible cosmetics, and the Emporium would find ways to discredit Zesty and send members to harass him on Twitter. The obsession got so out of hand that besides constantly insulting him in their own server behind his back, they would also begin putting so-called Easter eggs into their maps and cosmetics as an attempt to elicit a reaction out of Zesty. When Zesty did eventually talk about one Easter egg he found and explain why it didn't belong in the game, it sparked one of the biggest recent controversies between Zesty Jesus and the Emporium. The Emporium would frame Zesty's reaction to the Easter egg as a hysterical meltdown while implying he was transphobic as well, which is just a blatant lie. I'd also like to bring into question some of Zesty's biggest critics at the time, being Overlord Lettuce and Everick, two people who made outlandish tweets lying about Zesty, causing him to receive countless death threats and hateful messages through the course of 2 days. This whole incident would reveal a common theme with the TF2 Emporium, that if you don't share the same beliefs or actively show your support for the same things as the Emporium, you'll be hated by them. And one of the biggest reasons I believe the Emporium despises Zesty and goes through all this effort to deplatform him, whether being by going through a Patreon-only Discord server to find possibly incriminating messages, or by misconstruing the things he says against the things the Emporium believes in, either designs for cosmetics or politics. If you don't echo the same things the Emporium says, then you will become public enemy number one for them and start getting harassed. Combine this with the fact that Zesty affects the bottom line of some of the big names in the Emporium by demanding for higher quality content. The same creators, by the way, who actively mock TF2 players and who only make cosmetics to receive a paycheck each year, not because they have a true passion for the game. These are the two main reasons why Zesty Jesus has become so hated by Emporium members. One, being that he doesn't 100% agree with everything they say or do, and two, because it reduces the amount of profit Emporium members can make from terrible cosmetics, by criticizing the item and reducing the probability of the cosmetic getting added to the game. Before I finish off this section about Zesty Jesus, I just want to point out how mentally unstable some Emporium members can be to Zesty Jesus and just in general. There's the fact that a group of members paid for and produced an AI apology video using a clone of Zesty Jesus' voice, and some members actively crashing out in chat over politics, saying some pretty illegal things. I don't believe anyone in the TF2 community should be taking what most Emporium members say about Zesty Jesus with more than a grain of salt, when they're the same ones having public meltdowns on Twitter. Overall, there isn't really much I can suggest to fix the monopoly in TF2's workshop, as this problem is already so deeply embedded within the game of TF2, and much like all the other terrible organizations in the world that also supply us with products that we want, there's not really a clear way to stop supporting these organizations, like the TF2 Emporium, without outright not buying any type of cosmetic in the game. The influence of the TF2 Emporium has spread so far into the workshop that nearly every popular item that has been accepted into the game within the last 10 years have had the Emporium attached to it. The problem is partially a Valve problem, as they have inadvertently helped the creation of a monopoly in the community by picking from the same creators each year, since it's more convenient for them with less need to worry about cosmetic issues and payment. Valve have stated that they do try to pick from other creators, but in reality, this is only when the newer creator has a more notable name attached to the cosmetic. People could either start calling Valve out for their behavior and spread the word of the monopoly on their own platform, or they could take it into their own hands by outright not spending their money on cosmetics that have the Emporium's name attached to it. But other than that, there's no true way to defeat this monopoly, and it's mostly up to Valve whether they want to start choosing from different smaller groups of workshoppers for updates, which will be more work on their end, but it'll promote more fairness in the market. Much like other real monopolies in the world, there isn't really a way for the consumer base to get them to stop, apart from refusing to spend money. But I'm sure you would all know how much of a big ask it would be for the entire player base to stop buying cosmetics they like, just because they are associated with the Emporium. We all know how the boycott went a couple months back for #FixTF2, but overall, it's a bit disappointing how in a way, the TF2 Emporium have won, and will continue to hold a monopoly over the market for the foreseeable future. Which brings me to why I made this video. I made this video simply to raise awareness about the situation and have a clear piece of evidence documenting all of the terrible things the Emporium has done to the TF2 community. In the modern age of TF2 YouTube, where everything feels overstimulating and hollow, I just want to genuinely talk about a situation that has hardly ever been brought to attention. If you want to learn about the Tropic Crisis update and how modern community projects for TF2 don't feel the same as how they used to, you can click on the video on the screen. And as always, have a good one.